So, obviously, over the weekend, the US attacked Iran, and this is an escalation in the ongoing, what the media are calling a war between Israel and Iran as they have traded missile blows over the last week or so. Now, upon this happening, a couple people, maybe like 10 or so people, flocked to my YouTube comment section and commented on a video I made last week about how World War III hysteria is dumb and why this conflict, no matter how bad it's going to get, which I do actually say is a possibility in the video, it's not going to result in World War III. And loads of people commenting, well, you're wrong, this video aged like milk, you're an idiot, all that type of stuff. And the video is aged fine because I actually addressed the fact that the US could get involved in a war against Iran and could potentially even like invade Iran, and it's still not going to be World War III. But I do want to talk about that, and I want to talk about the meme of World War III that's been going around and how Americans kind of treat, I guess, this possibility of war, and how even Americans who are anti-war usually focus on how it will harm America and Americans, not Iranians and people in the Middle East. And you can tell that it's a population that are so heavily brainwashed to view a certain region a certain way that there isn't even an empathy extended. And as you see with the Uniparty in America, the Democrats pretty much by and large all want war with Iran and they support it. And that extends actually to Western politicians, with Keir Starmer and the heads of state across Europe also agreeing what the US did last night, saying Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. So this is a one-shot video, meaning no editing, just me, giving my takes on stuff. So yeah, let's start with all of this. So let's address the World War III stuff. So this isn't Hassan's fault, but all the Hassan clip channels are clickbaiting World War III. Loads of people are like making jokes about World War III, like, are we all gonna die right now? Are we entering war? I guess I like memeing it. And I'm not here to police people's memes, and I like dark humor a lot of the time, and like doomer humor, I guess we could call it. At the same time, it is funny that like a lot of Americans, like, they're making videos about how they'll be drafted and how useless they'll be, and I guess it's all fun and games for a lot of Americans, because I guess a lot of people who are memeing about World War III don't actually believe it's going to be, well, like a new world war. They're just making jokes about it. But to the people who think it's going to be a world war, and to the people clickbaiting and adding to this hysteria, again, I'm right about this. It's not going to be a world war in the Middle East over this. And so many people in the comments, like, it's clear they didn't watch the video, because they were telling me, oh, but China and Russia, they have relationships with all these groups, and what if they get involved? And this is the no, not just no. Like, I think I outlined very clearly how this isn't going to result in World War III, and the main point of that wasn't to just tell people, and I said this in the video, it wasn't just to tell people calm down and don't care about this. I literally started the video by saying you should care about this, but I reject the framing, because the framing is great for like propaganda by the right wing, but it also makes you feel a certain way towards it. So like I say, if Iran come back to the negotiating table with the US and Israel and say, we will cease hostilities for the time being with Israel, then you're going back to brunch. You're not going to give a shit about the region anymore, because all you gave a shit about was how this region might affect you and how scary Iran might actually attack the United States, because that's what they're fear-mongering about at the moment, that there are loads of sleeper cells across the US who are going to start engaging in, I don't know, guerrilla warfare against the US government, and you should be scared about this. It's kind of the same playbook they used in the run-up to the Iraq War. But let's expand upon that in two ways. Let's talk about the framing, and let's talk about Americans only thinking about themselves when it comes to their anti-war position. So I don't know if any of you guys remember, I was obviously like a lot smaller channel back then, but when Russia invaded Ukraine, the popular media framing was that this is the start of World War like III, in terms of it's very similar to World War II. So in World War II, you had Hitler basically taking over various different European nations, mainly Austria, but then Czechoslovakia. And what people were saying in the media was, if you do not stop Putin at like with Ukraine, if we don't actually have a war with him, he's gonna be the next Hitler. And that's the framing they used, Hitler. Which is interesting, because when I wrote my master's thesis, because I don't like always bring this up, but I do bring it up too much, I guess. it was in international relations, right? And I made my thesis about the media framing in the first Gulf War, and it was that Saddam Hussein was Hitler, and because he took over Kuwait, he was going to take over the whole Middle East. Therefore, he was the Hitler of the Middle East that must be stopped, because if he wasn't stopped, we would have another world war. And they use the exact same one for Putin. And I hate this framing, and I hate the World War framing, because the world is so different now, and it also puts you in a position as a citizen, if you consume the news, if you are being told again and again and again that very bad people, and Putin and Saddam Hussein were absolutely terrible people, that they're actually Hitler, and we can't repeat the mistakes of Munich and 1938. We have to go to war now, and that's how they drum up support for these wars, and that's how they make you think there isn't another option. And also, it strips the actual context from the conflict going on right now, because you're using this framing of World War II, which you've been taught a lot probably in your history class, but it's not helpful. It's sometimes helpful in certain ways, but it's not helpful because the world is so fucking different from 1938 now. I don't like this framing. And when we use the World War III framing as well, we're kind of using that framing again. It's that, this conflict, this regional conflict, and we've seen far worse in the region as well, including Iran, Iraq, the Iraq War, plenty of other ones. It's going to spawn World War III, and we should understand it in terms of that. And even with that framing, people like to use it for Iran and their nuclear program, that you have to stop them now, or it's going to get out of control and the whole world's going to come fight a war in the Middle East, like World War III, which is going to end civilization as we know it. Again, it's all media fear mongering, and it's to make you support war at the end of the day. Like, I know the Putin one is, I guess, the most similar because it is in Europe, but also Russian foreign policy hasn't changed too much from the Soviet days in terms of having this buffer zone against Western Europe, where most of the invasions against Russia have come from Napoleon, World War One with the Germans and others, and World War Two. So it's like a pretty consistent foreign policy thing. Not saying I agree with it, but if we're analysing their foreign policy, it's more like that compared to what Hitler was doing in World War Two with Saddam Hussein. It's similar. It wasn't like Hitler in World War Two, but again, it's to drum up support for war. And the media love these framings. And again, I wrote my whole thesis on that, analysing different media outlets, but including the New York Times, which is probably one of the worst propaganda outlets in the United States. But beyond that, like, I say reject the framing. Reject the framing because the world's too different. And also, this framing makes you uncritical towards the situation at the moment, because we're viewing the world in 2025. We're viewing the relationships between these countries. And even the way that JD Vance today was saying, we aren't at war with Iran, right? You can say that is different than what George Bush would have done. And that's why you have to analyse these patterns. It's very clear, I think, that the US at the moment is not willing to do like a full-scale invasion of Iran. That is not the case in like 2001, when they actually wanted to do a full-scale invasion of Iran. They were just going to do it after the Iraq War if that went well for them, which it didn't, so they didn't do it. So even that, we're seeing how things are different, and we see the role of China and Russia in geopolitics and how that's different from even the Cold War. And in the Cold War, we understood when stuff happened in the Middle East, it wouldn't become a world war, because the Cold War aspect means that if there's one side involved heavily, like the United States in the Middle East or Russia in Afghanistan, it stands to reason that the other side is probably going to use a proxy and not directly engage the other superpower, because of the risk of an actual world war, which would probably be a nuclear war, right? So we understand it in that context, and when we look back, we all understand it. But for some reason, this World War III meme and framing has caught on a lot. But now let's talk about US leftists, specifically US leftists, but the whole of the US, and I'm not saying every single leftist, but a lot of the sentiment I saw online last night was, this is bad because it might affect me. And obviously, I'm glad anyone is anti war with Iran, no matter what. That's a good thing. But also, if you're not anti-war because you're pro-humanity, you are going to be susceptible to actually supporting war at some point. So what I saw a lot of people saying is, Trump just started war with Iran, and that is bad because it's going to affect oil prices. It's probably going to affect the global supply chain, which will increase your price of your consumer goods. And it might start insurgent groups in the US to start attacking us. And also some libs were saying, oh, we didn't go through Congress, so like that's bad because he's like a dictator, but we all know the Democrats would have like voted for this, so I don't really care about that aspect. But I wrote this down and I'll read it because I feel like especially with a one shot, I might ramble too much if I don't focus. So I posted on Blue Sky. I noticed that the anti war sentiment in America is not based on the notion that Iranians are human beings or equal human beings who don't deserve this to happen to them. It's almost purely based on US American self interest. They think it's bad to hit Iran because it could escalate into a war with the US, a war that would be a waste of American life and would also cause more terror attacks on Americans. I've also seen people talk about their consumerism being affected, like I said, with the petrol prices and supply chain issues. Rarely is the anti war sentiment in America rooted in wanting Iranians to live their lives in peace away from Israeli and US aggression. Nor do I see any calls for Iran to be integrated properly into the international community, free of sanctions and other restrictions. Is this because the Iranian government is bad, or because 95% of Americans just subtly hate Muslims? Just like every American war movie, even the good ones, this is being framed as an incoming American tragedy, not something that is a tragedy inflicted by Americans onto others. I honestly think that most Americans are so racist they can't actually imagine being anti-war that doesn't revolve around some sort of protectionism for their own consumption and self-interest. It's definitely not rooted in being pro-humanity. Now, before a lot of you Americans get butthurt, I do realise a lot of you Americans do care about the humanity side, and I also recognise that that is not unique to America. The British version of this is, while I would say there is a higher contingent of people who care based on the humanity side, it could be because we do have like a larger Muslim population in the UK, so we do have that exchange of cultures a bit more compared to the US. But also, what British people generally feel is apathy, where it's like, I don't want to get involved in that more than like thinking about their consumption because like we're stupid, to be honest. Like I don't feel a lot of us really understand how that would even impact us. But yeah, I think generally a lot of people, they will make the caveat that while the Iranian government is bad, like who gives a shit? It doesn't matter. When you're talking about humans across the globe, why are you bringing their government into it? Especially when it's like a government like Iran, which is pretty untouchable by your average person and has solidified thanks to constant interventions by Western powers, which has made people even rally around it or have entrenched their government even more. When you talk about Americans, rarely do you say all their governments are filled with war criminals, every single one, including the Democrats. You never say that before you say, but Americans do not deserve a natural disaster happening to them. People don't do that. So you don't need to do it for countries that you've been brainwashed to hate because the people are not the government. That is something people always say about Donald Trump is not the US citizens, but you would say that more people support US governments, various ones, either Obama or Trump, than people in Iran support their own government, right? But we don't make the same, like, sort of caveat for that. And also when it comes to things like war, 2/3 of Americans support the Iraq war. And it's like, we don't say that then Americans deserve loads of bad shit happening to them because they were misled by their propaganda networks, which pose as news broadcasters, right? So please, when you're thinking about why you're anti-war, I'm obviously happy if you're against this no matter what, but think about the reasons that we are all very, very similar. People who live under, like, capitalist governments or more religious governments, fundamentally our baseline of, like, what we want out of life, what we don't like in life, we don't like being exploited, what our problems are, they are all very similar, and we have so much more in common with each other than, that sets us apart. And I attribute a lot of this American ignorance because they have been so isolated and they can just view war in the video game sense. Like, war does not affect America, and the wars they do to the Middle East don't affect Americans, by and large, apart from the prices of goods. Like, even World War One and World War Two, the American home front didn't really suffer. And the only American home front that actually suffered in World War Two was their colonies in the Pacific, which obviously aren't even theirs to begin with. So it doesn't suffer in that, and it only benefits from war. World War One and World War Two made the American economy an absolute powerhouse and helped it dominate the globe. And even when they fight wars in Vietnam and the Middle East, it never affects Americans. So they don't have that cultural exchange to begin with a lot of the world they're even attacking until afterwards when they might come over there as refugees, like the Vietnamese, for example. And they just view war in such a different way. So the only thing they give a shit about is, how does this actually affect my life? And if it doesn't affect your life, then of course, like many Americans, a lot of these wars are popular throughout. And even the Vietnam War, you've been misled by Hollywood. The Vietnam War was totally popular until US involvement ended in 1973. Totally popular. You ever been told that at school? That most people supported the Vietnam War throughout the entire thing? One of the worst crimes ever by the US against the Vietnamese people? Most people supported that. And of course, Americans did. They were completely brainwashed to support this. And, massive anti-communist. And the anti-communism, while still present, has been, since the 1990s, put on the back burner in favour of anti-Islam. And this anti-Islam isn't really based in many differences between ideologies with conservative Muslims, which a lot of Republicans would have a lot to, agree upon with them. It's more this racialized, dehumanized stereotype of what a Muslim is. Like, how many, I guess, even Americans generally would know Iranians, like, aren't Arabs, for example? And you saw that interview of Tucker Carlson and Ted Cruz. That is a politician who is privy to so much information that you're not, and he doesn't know the first fucking thing about a government and a country he seeks to destroy. And then you think the average American is going to really know what's going on. So I would say, if you're some sort of liberal watching this, and you do generally just care about this because Trump didn't get congressional approval and your oil price might go up, think about the Iranian people like you, because they are like you. And most people, like, we're humans, we all have similarities, and a lot of them are very strong. And yeah, I just hope people realize that. And even if you aren't like well traveled, or you've even left your hometown in America, you still have to realize that, and just think about everyone you know in your own life, good and bad, or misinformed and propagandized, and think about how you relate to them on a human level. And then extend that to everyone in the fucking world apart from like billionaires or something. So that is it for the video. Just wanted to address a couple things. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, and if you made it this far, thank you for watching.